Sup, nerd. Okay, so you know how everyone has a comfort game? Like that game you come back to time and time again that makes you feel all cozy, like a warm blankie and some hot cocoa. I think when you describe a game like that, the examples people often give gravitate toward cozy games, which for anyone who's unaware, are an entire genre of games, usually indie games but not always, that are completely designed around small-scale cozy aesthetics and experiences. The thing about that is, if you ask people what their comfort game is, the game they return to when they need that safety net, they'll often mention games like Breath of the Wild or Skyrim. On this channel, I've mentioned before that my comfort game used to be Mario Galaxy. Growing up, whenever I was sick, I would play Galaxy and order Mary Browns. And to be fair, Mario is a pretty comfy, low-stakes game. But if you asked me now which game made me feel the most comfortable, I think I might say Sea of Thieves. A game about stealing treasure and fighting skeletons and getting absolutely destroyed by other players in ship-to-ship combat. It's not always the most relaxing game. So what gives? Why do people find games like Skyrim or Zelda or Sea of Thieves so relaxing, even though the premises aren't exactly the coziest things you've ever heard? Well, I'll give you a hint. It's not the combat. In fact, despite all the high-action moments, most of these games have pretty low stakes. Look at a game like Breath of the Wild. Sure, there are lots of moments where you're fighting monsters and challenging tough bosses. Some of these guys can be pretty scary, but all that time spent fighting is equally balanced by the game's downtime. Most of the time spent in a game like Breath of the Wild or Skyrim is spent traveling between locations, exploring your surroundings. In fact, I'd say more than half the time I spend playing these games is just me being distracted and going off path. The world is littered with things to do and sights to see, so it's almost impossible to follow the goal all the way through. And even if you are trying to follow the goal using the most direct path, you find yourself in goofy situations, like trying to climb the steepest mountain on horseback. Even if you die or game over, nothing's lost. If anything, it's a funny and memorable moment, something to look back on with comfort and joy. I couldn't even name the number of times I completely forgot what was at stake and wandered into a cave and meandered for hours, or getting completely immersed in the world, giving the stable dog treats. For many of these games, the main goal is so deprioritized that it may as well not exist at all, which is great if what you need is a comfortable, no-stakes experience. I think most people have at least one fond memory of sitting on the couch all cozied up messing around with weird bugs or building some sort of messed up contraption just to see what'll happen if they do. And that's not even to mention games that are basically 100% downtime. It's easy to boot up Minecraft with a couple of friends and get completely sucked in making a cute log cabin for hours or days, only to get lost in the wilderness and start all over again. Or imagining your dream house and doing all the interior design in Animal Crossing so you can have your friends over to visit. For me in Sea of Thieves, I enjoy nothing more than steering my ship through calm seas in search of treasure. When there's not too much at stake or the game's rewards are the gameplay itself, it can be easy to forget about the world around you and just let those anxieties melt away. You're not worried about your day-to-day life or winning a tournament, and ideally, you're not going to lose hours or days of progress. Or at least, not any progress that would be less fun to make a second time. It's okay if your cool hovercraft doesn't work because you can just build it again, and hey, if you get lost and can't find your house, that's why you booted up Minecraft in the first place, to build one. And when you're joined by friends, that feeling can be amplified tenfold. I think most people have played Minecraft with friends before, and anyone who has can attest that it can be some of the most fun that games have to offer. Not because of its high-octane action sequences, but because of how you get to work with your friends to create something new. Whether it's designing a cute little log cabin or trying to figure out how to make a working calculator, the act of being hands-on and building something together is, I think, fundamental to cementing existing friendships and, by extension, how good a game makes you feel. Heck, it also counts if you're just passing the controller back and forth while you hang out on the couch. I can't even count the number of times my friends and I would do this in high school. Just sit back, break open a bag of chips, and take turns messing around in Assassin's Creed. We weren't running through any missions or playing together, but we were absolutely still playing together and making new memories. People and YouTube video essayists, these are different things, don't confuse them, love to talk about how the best games are the ones in which your story is unique. That's how Skyrim, Elden Ring, Breath of the Wild, and so many other games got so popular. Every experience is unique, and you can take that story and share it at school or work or in a YouTube video. So when those stories are made together with friends, it strengthens that attachment. It makes it more important, more special. And when strong memories like the ones you share with friends are formed, it draws you back to the place where it all happened. Now, that's not to say that multiplayer or co-op are needed to make a game comfortable. There are lots of things that go into that. Hell, I don't even think most people's comfort game is multiplayer, but it really does help. What I think is even more important than those stories and relationships are the things that make you physically comfortable. All that stuff that lets you forget about the world around you and really immerse yourself in the world of the game. Now, immersion can mean a lot of things to a lot of people, and I think most of the time when people talk about immersion, they mean how realistic a game is. Something where you feel like you are a part of the game world itself. That usually comes with the caveat that a game can't look or feel very gamey. Minimal UI and a bunch of other gameplay elements tuned down to be as unintrusive as possible. That's not what I'm talking about here. When I say immersion in this context, I mean the ability for the game to make you forget about the world around you. One of the easiest ways to do this is with audio design. Now, strangely enough, this is a thing you tend to see most predominantly in horror games. Not comfy, I know. But when you're playing a scary game, one of the best ways to make you feel uneasy is to fill it with atmospheric sound. The rattling of vents, creaking of metal, clattering of some unknown thing off in the distance, the footsteps just behind your back beating slowly on the ground as the faceless old woman who secretly lives in your home looks just out of sight. All of these things combine to grab your attention and drag you into the world of the game, despite whatever you may have going on outside it. Now, let's take that idea and twist it slightly in a more calming and upbeat direction. A slight breeze rolls through the air. Crickets chirp in the distance as waves crash along the shore. It's raining slightly, and a seabird can be heard calling out in the distance. To reinforce the tranquil ambience, a gentle rhythm floats through the air. If I'm honest, I think good ambient sound is about 90% of the equation when it comes to designing a comforting experience, and music can really give a game that extra push. I think the best example of this is in Breath of the Wild, where soft piano twinkles in the background, almost as if it's part of the environmental sound, not a separate soundtrack. But if I had to choose a game where the soundtrack can be comforting in its own right, my personal favorite would be Guild Wars 2, another comfort game of mine. It never fails to draw me in when I'm hanging around the colder areas of the world with soft strings and horns lightly playing over the gentle ambience in the distance. A lot of people have also told me that Skyrim does this exact thing for them, and of course it comes to me as no surprise since the soundtracks for both of these games are composed by Jeremy Soule, who is a master at achieving that sort of fantastical yet still atmospheric sound. But really, any music can give that feeling of comfort. It doesn't need to be soothing or calm. Even grand orchestral music or licensed rock songs can do it for you. Music is a huge source of nostalgia, so it's kind of inevitable that the music associated with games you love will comfort you, even without the full context of the game to go with it. And then of course, there's environment design. It's easy to get absorbed into a world that you love, so when a game takes place in a setting that matches what you love, you're way more likely to immerse yourself in it. Maybe you're like me and you just love the giant robots in the world of Horizon, climbing a tall neck and looking out over the ruined landscape. Horizon was, to me, one of those games with a world and setting that I found so interesting. I went way out of my way to find every little piece of lore I could, which was surprisingly less involved than a lot of other games. Some games, like Souls-likes for example, things like Dark Souls and Elden Ring, scatter bits of lore and world building everywhere throughout the world. So if you have an interest in the history of the setting, you're incentivized to go explore every crack and crevice of the environment. And what you come away with is not only an understanding of how the world came to be the way that it is, but also an immense attachment to a place you've invested yourself in so deeply. Some environments also lend themselves to comfort more than others. It's hard to argue that Elden Ring or Dark Souls has a comfortable environment, even if the environment brings you comfort. if that makes any sense. What with a dark, foreboding atmosphere. Worlds with lots of bright and welcoming places or characters will make it easier for you to let go and relax. Booting up a game like Animal Crossing is a wildly different experience to something like Dark Souls. But one of the most comforting things an environment can have is quiet little spots where there's not much going on. Floating around through calm open seas, slowly making your way from island to island in search of treasure, or wandering through the woods in the eerie calm of winter. These subdued moments carry a game straight into comfort territory for me. When I think of comforting games, my mind goes straight to walking through the snow in Skyrim, or sitting around in the wilderness of Tyria in Guild Wars 2. And most of all, the open sea in Sea of Thieves. But everyone's different. Maybe that's not what does it for you. In trying to find what makes a game comfortable, even outside of games designed specifically for that purpose, what I found to be most important are the stakes, the stories, the sound, and the setting. But this isn't a list of requirements. Your comfort game might have all of these things, or it might have none of them. What's important is that it gives you those comfy vibes you're looking for. I hope at least that gives you some insight into how games are designed to make you feel certain ways. Games are an incredible art form, partly because of how they can play with your emotions, and it's so cool how developers can achieve these things, even sometimes by accident. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have some treasure to go hunt.